Alrighty, so let's do week 10. So in week 10, we're going to start a new data set, but continuing the problem set that we've been working on with CS50. So I have open both the CS50 site, I have open my code space, I have open the instructions, okay? So that's how I'll get started. And I think what I'll do is do one video just for the code along, and then I'll come back and do another one for what you need to do for the attendance post. Okay, so looking at the instructions, going to the top here, the setup is nothing new. So in a sense, I would say test yourself to see how well you can just walk through these and get this done, and then pause the video, and then when you're ready, come back and I'll just show you mine, and then we'll walk through the next part. Okay, so at this point, the output should look something like this. Or actually almost identical. So I've set up my query file for DSE. We'll talk about what that is in a minute. I have then updated my proof of work to be DS. I've created my dataset file with my schema. So we'll start looking at the data here in a minute. I then ran my queries, right, that gave me the data, and then then I ran the proof of work, right? So then I ran this. Okay, so that's how I've gotten to the place that I am, and I think I've got everything done because I think I end up having you do the README file. Yeah, I'll have you do the README file on the next step, or you could do it now, right, because you're going to do it next anyway. And I already have mine. Oops, wrong screen. I already have mine up and going, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so coming back here. So now that we have the data, let's talk about this data set that we're going to deal with this week. So this week we're continuing our relating adventure, and we're moving on to a new data set that may not feel as fun as the last. Depending on how you felt about the last one, you may or may not walk away with a good feeling. Hopefully you do. I know that last one was a challenge, but that's part of what this is about, is challenging ourselves. This one is a challenge in a very different way. So in this data set, we're not telling you specifically which SQL to use, whether it be just a simple query, a join query, or you could do it as a subquery. And I'm not going to specify either. Part of this is just reading the data to try to figure out what's needed. Now, in this case, it's the mass elementary, secondary education. And so if you look here, and you've already gotten the data. I didn't actually even cover that. But in this case, because of the git ignore that we did last time, I have the database in here. And it is grayed out because it's not being version controlled. Okay, I gotta drop that one so we don't come back to it. All right, so now let's go ahead and create that README file, and then change our proof of work now, right? So instead of going to that DESC, or the data set one, you know what? I'm just going to close that. I run locally as well, and that's what that was. Okay, so over here, I'd also change this because I don't, and by the way, you shouldn't mix your DS file with your other proof of work file. It just doesn't, it doesn't look at this because this file has a specific purpose. Okay, so now let's actually spend a moment here talking about this database. So in this database, you have districts, school districts. School districts contain schools. Districts make expenditures, districts receive evaluations, and staff evaluations are delivered to the staff. Okay, so you could reverse that, received, and then you could then understand that schools also do graduation reports, and though you can see their relationships as well. Now, one of the things about this data set, and I think this is kind of a clue, and we start to see this in the data when we just start looking at it, which I will in a minute, but you cleverly note that some of these relationships could be implemented with a single table. You'd be correct. Although in this case, you simply have to work with whatever your colleagues created. Now, the reason I think this is specific is that this is true. In your life, you may be dealing with databases that have not been optimized, that have not been normalized. And if you don't know what normalization is, you're going to learn about that soon. But in this case, just know that you may see a duplicate. Okay? So let's look at this first one. And let me make sure I don't have anything else you need to do before we get started. No, go along with me. Okay? And you've got that file, and you've got the README file. Okay, so this is where we would look at the problem. So let's actually read. Now, in my instruction, I provided, and we're going to do one together. You'll do the rest of these on your own. There'll be a total of 6, so you'll have 5 to do. And so your colleagues are preparing a map of the public school systems in Mass, and then write a query, SQL query, to find the names and the cities of all the public schools in Mass. Okay? Keep in mind that not all schools in the schools table, it even tells you which table to go after, are considered traditional public schools. Mass recognizes charter schools, which, according to them, are considered distinct. So I think the point is here that we're going specifically after public schools. Okay, and now what I've done that CS50 put at the bottom, but I just put them together, and you'll see why in a minute, is what the results should look like. Okay, so in this case, 2 columns. So in that, where's that come from? We want names and we want cities. Okay, so, and then it gives us a count, and this is where I'm going to show you how to do a subquery just to create these counts, and I want those included in your proof of work. Okay, so back over here, I did some, so you didn't have to watch me type, some print statements, and in this case, we're going to come to this in a minute, okay? So what do? Well, we know we want a select, of course, and in this case, we want name. Now, you know, they're specific, and when you're coding, it is good to be specific here, because sometimes you'll see me do star here, but in this case, I only need name and city, but I'm also going to include type, okay? Because type, and now what do I know? And this is where I would stop and start looking at the data. So in our data sample that we created, okay, I have districts. Now I've listed, and one thing I think I would probably do with this data set file, or this DS data set information, I would actually add a print here for, and I probably should have done this. Maybe you've already done this, and I hope you did. Good on you. So this shows me the district file. Now notice I have a type in the district file, and it's got public school districts. So in this case, looking at the data, you might think, well, wait a minute, wouldn't I need to join these two? And that's where you could start writing queries against this file, you know, thinking that. And yet, if I read the problem carefully enough, right, I want in the school's table, they actually tell you which table to go after. So reading the problem carefully is very helpful. And because sometimes you'll go down a road where you're like, wait a minute. Because I actually did that when I was playing around in my writing of queries. I noticed I was actually going at the first one against the district table because I saw the type in here. But then I went and looked, and I'm like, oh, you know what? Schools, and they said schools table, and they have a type, and this is where it can throw you off when you first start looking at this data. And that's why I put type in here, okay? So I'm just telling you, learning to just read what's in that file, or look at, you know, what are the columns, the tables themselves. So in this case, here's what I would do. I would do from, right, schools. And then I would do where. Now notice how, and some of you, and this is kind of getting to a style thing, we haven't said this is how you have to do them. Some people are putting them all in one line. I like to break them up like this just because it's easier for me to read, especially if I have something else going on in the screen. And so what I could do here, right, first, just to start, is I could just run this. And this would be, again, where I'm building up my proof of work, right? So I could come down, I'm in my SQL file. I would want to run my dot just because I just started it, and I know that Okay, good. And then I would run my query and I would see all these out here. Now, one thing is I'm guessing right now, and here's where you might wonder, well, wonder what this count is. And this is where I'm going to have you from here on out also have this code. And this code is going to just basically act as your count. So let's actually show you what that looks like. Okay, so I'm going to uncomment this code out for a minute. Okay, and this was something I was playing around with earlier. I could do this as public school, pub school count. Okay, and what you do is a select star, and then we're using the alias, and then from. So what will go in between here is our query from above. Okay, so if I copy that, I bring it down in here, and then I run just this. Now we actually will run them to the proof of work in file in a minute, but I just want to show you. If I run it this way, what are my results? Okay, so what are the results I wanted? So I know I'm off, not by a lot, okay? But this is where, I'm like, okay, I did my first attempt, right? Come in here. So this is and where you do your back ticks. Ooh, one more, right? So now I've shown, and this is how I'm just demonstrating this to you. Most of you are getting this, but really what I'm looking for is your your process, your thought process about the way you move from here or through here. So we're going to come back to this in a minute, okay? I'm going to actually just for a moment get rid of that, and I'm going to comment this out, okay? So I got not only the output, but I also got an account that I know is wrong, which is not surprising given my query, okay? So in this case, I know I want to say where type, because that's the column name, equals. Now this is what I want to talk about, because the first logical thing, and it's not necessarily that it's wrong, okay? That if I go in here and I look, I would think, okay. And even in this limited 10 records, I would see that I have some charter schools, so I would go here, right? So in this case, I'd go, okay. Now, again, I'm not doing my proof of work yet. I'm just looking at the output. And it looks like, now mine you could see it stuttered a little bit. It's probably because of my internet connection right now. But in this case, I'm getting some, but I would want to go, okay, well then what's my results from here, right? Oop. So then I would take this and I'd copy it down in here. I would uncomment this. And actually, I'm getting, oh, sorry, my uncomment did not work. Oh, yeah, why didn't my uncomment work? Because I selected items that, the way I had commented it out, actually, it should have just been that one. And then that one. Yeah, it's the way I originally did it, it wasn't correct, okay? But let's just now, okay, because we're not done with it, we're not ready to do the proof of work, we're still just playing to see if we can get the correct results. Oh, I think I see it. Parse error. Okay, I'm gonna look. I bet you guys already saw it, didn't you? Right? So I'm gonna back up. I'm going to back up because here's what I did. I did accidentally. And, these kinds of things, and some might argue, would be things real you might want to leave out because it gets confusing to see somebody else's errors. But writing code, this is just kind of the reality of it. So I'm going to copy this. I had accidentally gotten rid of that. And now I see I'm getting the right result. Okay, I'm getting the result that I expected. But the path I was leading you down was, in this case, because this type, and this is where we're kind of heading towards writing soon, this type in the schools is a text. And anytime we go after a text field, there could always be some variation. And so going after an exact match may or may not deliver what we want. And we have to start thinking about how is this data being entered? If it's in a drop down, chances are it's consistent. If somebody's entering it, chances are it won't be. But we won't know that when we're creating the database, although if you're working with a team, you might. So anytime I go after a string, I generally will do a like, and I will just give that wildcard that we have now seen several times to say anything that has public school in it. Okay? And this also could help accommodate or account for what we call spaces. Okay? So this is the line that I've changed, and now I would want to know. I wouldn't necessarily have to run. I would want to run this, by the way. I would want to actually just come down here and say, hey, did that change? Did I have an error on my code? No, I'm still getting it, but now I want to say, did that code change my record count right here? Okay, so here. So now I'd want to run this. Okay. So hopefully you're starting to see, and of course, another mistake. Let's see. Oh, duh. How did I do that? Yeah. Okay. Good. So I'm getting the same results, but from a query perspective and from accounting for what may be called an edge case. Edge case, if you've never heard that, is a good idea. Okay, so now that I know both my count and this is correct, now I would do this. I would uncomment this out, so I have some description here. I do have my description there. I've run my queries. I would now run over because I'm going to now do my, and here, right, run my proof of work. Now, in my proof of work, it got created here. And then what should be, now in this case, and this threw me off. I got to tell you, I'm almost embarrassed to say how long this took me. When I first did this, I was looking through this file. And I was like, okay, how many records should I see? I should see 1,761 records. And I was like, when I scrolled through the file and I passed that number, I was like, wait, why? Why would my file, okay, why would my file, and by the way, we can see the count here, but we can see the end of the output here. Why would it be so much longer? And I'm almost embarrassed to say how long it took me to figure this out, but this is, again, the nature of coding, okay? And the nature of, in this case, coding SQL is to make sure I get the right answer. And I'll tell you the answer, but me telling you the answer, and this is part of why I'm actually highlighting this, isn't always helpful. It can be to quickly get to why, and maybe it'll help you in the future, but also the problem-solving steps that you're taking. And that's where if you spend a lot of time trying to problem solve something and you're not getting there, come talk to other people. By the way, if you don't have other people to talk to, this is a great use of chat. I actually had a conversation with Chat about this. I'm like, wait a minute, what would cause these things to be different? And Chat's like, and Chat tried to tell me, the dot mode. Oh, yeah, And again, a whole session. And again, it probably took me 20, 30 minutes here. And in some sense, I was very frustrated. But once I found the answer, I wasn't. So the answer was because in this case, when we do dot box, we're adding spaces. So that file, right? And it would only be the first run of the proof of work that I could actually do this, which is part of why I'm actually having you run the count so you can actually count it to compare it. Okay. Hopefully you get the idea of what I'm going after. So now let's actually go over, run our, we already have, right? So now in this case, we've done the first part. Let's go here. And then I'll have you do a commit. And then I think I'm going to come back around. Oh, yeah, so here it is, right? So make sure, and again, think about that proof of work file, right? I just gave you a simple example today of doing it, but I'm really just trying to get you understanding how important this file is as we move forward. And I think all you'll have to do here is query 1. And then I will do another video for the rest of the stuff inside of the attendance that you need to do. Okay, I hope this was helpful.